Recording.
Good. Welcome to the planning board meeting for December 1st, 2021. I'll begin with roll call. Alden Clark.
Here.
Beth DeLille. Bob Kaup.
Here.
Heather Rogers.
Here.
Rick Tainter.
Here.
Don Walters. Bonnie Sontag here. We also have Linda Guthrie and Andy Port that I can see. I'll go through the agenda and then we'll get started. Under general business, we have Evergreen Commons, final approval, approved conservation restriction, release of last certificate of occupancy, and release of tripartite agreement. Second item is approval not required for 3335 Toppins Lane. There's some correspondence to acknowledge, approval of minutes, and other updates. So we'll get started with the first agenda item, which is Evergreen Commons. We've had some background on that in our staff report, but I'd like to call on Attorney Mead, if she's going to be representing her client tonight, to explain the situation to us, please.
Sure. Thank you, Madam Chair and members of the board. It's good to see you. I haven't seen you in a while. Lisa Mead, Tellerman Costa 30 Green Street, on behalf of Evergreen Commons LLC. So as the chair suggested, we're here for three reasons. Basically to close out the project from the planning board's perspective. And that is to release the tripartite agreement, approve and the conservation restriction, which then releases, our request is to release the final certificate of occupancy, and I'll talk to you about that in a minute. If you could just go to the first slide, just to give folks an overview. So for those of you who weren't part of this, and that's some of you, and some of you are still here, I just wanted to show this to you. So this is ultimately the operation and maintenance plan, and final, the goal and the purpose of this is it's attached to the conservation restriction along with the next slide, which I'll show you in a minute. But this is ultimately the open space that was preserved as a result of the subdivision approval by the planning board. We're all pretty excited about it. The Conservation Commission, I think, is pretty excited about it. We had a walk through the Conservation Commission a few weeks ago, it's actually amazing the ecological transformation that has taken place as a result of the improvements that were made. And that we witnessed when we walked around the area. So we have provided with our last submission all of the as-built plans of the infrastructure. We've provided the stormwater operation and maintenance plan. We've provided the plans showing each lot and the impervious area on each lot, both by single plan per lot to be included in the building department files, as well as an overall plan with a table per lot. Tony and Jamie have all been out to the property as recently as this morning. And as a result of that, all of the infrastructure is completed. And I think Andy can speak to this. And we're seeking the release of the tripartite agreement that the board has on the property. I provided a release to you. That was in exchange for releasing the last lot, not an occupancy permit, but for the last lot. So the tripartite agreement is here. Madam Chair, do you want me to just keep going until we go through everything and then circle back?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the next request is to have the board approve the Conservation Commission, which is, I think, a formality for this board because the real control over the conservation restriction is the Conservation Commission. Over the past year, we have been working on the conservation restriction. And for those of you who are not familiar with the history of this site, when this was approved, we originally had a declaration of restriction that was put on the property so that before any lots were transferred out, it was clear to all of the people who were buying homes that there would eventually be a conservation restriction put in place. And so the declaration of restriction was immediately filed. It included all the prohibited and permitted uses on the property. That was formalized through a conservation restriction, which over the last year we have been working on with Commonwealth of Massachusetts Executive Office of Energy and Environmental Affairs, the city solicitor, as well as the conservation agent and conservation commission. About a month and a half ago, that was approved by the Commonwealth, and the applicant has finished all of the open space improvements and the baseline documentation. We did a presentation at the last Conservation Commission meeting for this. They approved the conservation restriction. The conservation restriction does include a monitoring plan, which has had its first submission, and that includes the baseline documentation. And every year thereafter or hereafter, the homeowners association, through a hired conservation monitoring agent, will go out and do the exact same monitoring and turn that in on an annual basis to the Conservation Commission. So the Conservation Commission approved the conservation restriction at their last meeting. The City Council just 2 nights ago also approved the conservation restriction, authorizing the mayor to sign it. And then this board has a condition that says that until the conservation restriction is recorded, the last occupancy permit can't be released. So our request of you this evening is not only to do your kind of pro forma approval of the conservation restriction, having had its all other approvals, but in exchange for security, to release the last certificate of occupancy, because now we have to get the Commonwealth signature and then record it. I anticipate that the Conservation Commission will sign the restriction on Tuesday of next week, as will the mayor, and then we'll send it off to EEA and get their signature. However, that could take a couple of weeks, and our goal is to transfer the last house prior to the receipt of that back from EEA, at which time we will record it and provide the planning office and the Conservation Commission with proof of recording. We understand the whole purpose about holding the occupancy permit. So in exchange for that, the applicant is agreed to put down a $50,000 security with the city cash to guarantee that that will be recorded. And I don't think that's any small amount of security, but we understand the gravity of the situation. So everybody wants to make sure the restriction gets recorded. So we are asking the board to A, approve the conservation restriction, and B, then allow the applicant to release the last, or the city to release the last occupancy permit in exchange for the security being deposited with the planning office. If you could go to the next slide, I just want to also show you, this is the maintenance, open space maintenance area. So that's why there are all the colors on the prior plan. So this gets attached to the conservation restriction, and this is how the area is maintained. Each of the open space conservation areas, both wetlands area A, area 2 restoration area, stormwater area, pollinator meadow, open managed lawn area, and I can't see the last one because my tile is in the way. If you could go back up to the plan, I think the applicant is pretty proud of this development, and as is, I think, the Conservation Commission. But just to give everybody an idea of what happens here, you can enter this site either coming down on Duffy Drive from Brown Avenue at the top of the plan and enter into the walking path or the trails that go throughout the site around the wetlands area up to the back. As you go to the bottom of this page, the kids actually in this neighborhood and surrounding neighborhoods sled on that hill in the back in the wintertime. And then as you go through the middle of what is called the open lawn area, which is where the playground is, and then that water feature. In the wintertime, that water feature is actually used as an ice skating pond, which is kind of fun too. And then you can also enter back out the trail out to Duffy at the circle. The central green, if you go out there in the summertime or in the spring or the fall, kids from both the neighborhood, this new neighborhood, and the neighborhood up of Brown Avenue and Boyd Drive are playing pickup soccer Frisbee and a bunch of other stuff. There's a brick pizza oven and some other stuff under the at the end where there's a fireplace, and the neighborhood and everybody else enjoys that area as well. So this is I think it's a stellar example of a true OSRD for the city of Newburyport. So with that, I'll turn it over to the chair and happy to take any questions.
Great, thank you very much. Questions from board members? Anybody have any questions? Rick?
One question, has the easement been recorded for the multi-use trail?
No, all of the, thank you, Rick. So, well, the trail is part of the open space, right? So that you don't need to have an easement. The open space is all open to the public. All of the conservation area is open to the public. So there doesn't need to be an easement. There is the construction easement for the pathway up to the highway, if that's what you're referring to.
That's what I'm referring to, yes.
Okay, so that easement, along with the deed to the water department land, which is at the middle of this page, that kind of half moon white area, and along with the land at the sewer pump station which is the entry off of Boyd Drive. Those are pending in front of the city council right now. And they were all submitted to the city council at the same time. But the first planning and development committee meeting that the city council had, Andy wasn't able to attend, and they didn't want to move forward on it. And then, so they had a planning and development committee meeting this last week before the city council meeting, but because of their agenda, they didn't spend a lot of time on this except for to get the conservation restriction through. And so they moved it to their next meeting, and they're having a planning and development committee meeting a week from, this Thursday, actually. And then it'll be on the next agenda for the city council.
So I guess the question is, what is the security to make sure all of those things happen before we lose all of our control over the subdivision? Or
well, we've provided them to the city council. We've done what we're supposed to do.
Okay. So the timing of the city council recording those, taking care of the recording of those, accepting them and recording them is not an issue.
Yeah, that's not, I mean, we've done what we're supposed to do, and now we need to have the city approve them, right?
And then the other question that I had was in the notes that we got from the planning department, there was the issue about requesting release of the tripartite agreement. Now we have a draft motion before us that doesn't address that. And is there a substitute draft motion? I guess is a question for Andy to add the additional information about release of the tripartite agreement.
Yeah, Caitlin, I don't think that sent out a draft motion for that, but I can certainly add that if you'd like.
Yeah, I did provide the release of the tripartite agreement in my filing. So we would appreciate that to be added to any motion you're going to make.
So just to confirm, Andy, there has been confirmation from DPS.
That's correct. We received an email this morning from the director that they had satisfactorily completed the paving work that was outstanding.
Okay, so what we could do is just tack on to the draft motion an inclusion of release of the tripartite agreement. But there's also something else missing, given what Attorney Mead said earlier, that I don't see any wording in here that says we actually approve the conservation restriction. Is that something we should be including in our motion as well?
I would ask you that you do it because it's actually the reason, no, as much as I love appearing before the board, I don't come here for extra reasons, right? So you have a condition that says you have to approve it. So that's why I did it, even though it's a document of the Conservation Commission.
Okay. So Andy, would there be any problem with putting all three items into this one motion, or would you prefer to make it cleaner and have three separate?
No, I think that's fine. After the second line where we say released at the recording of the conservation restriction, I would just say suggest inserting and approve such restriction.
Okay.
And then, perhaps at the end, we can just note that in addition, the planning board hereby releases the tripartite agreement in recognition of completion of the outstanding construction work.
Okay, I'm just going to say releases the tripartite agreement, and you can put the rest of that in when you finalize it.
Understood.
Okay. Before we go for the vote, I want to just make sure everybody's had their questions answered or want to make any comments about this. Anybody else like to speak up at this point? Don't see any hands or anything else indicating that. So I'd say we're ready for the motion. May I have a volunteer to make the motion as discussed? Any one of you is eligible. Let's do it.
So moved, Alden.
Thank you. Second?
Second. Rick.
Rick. So it's Alden and Rick with the three pieces in there that I'm sure Andy has noted and will finalize for signature.
Will do.
Thank you. Let me take roll on voting to approve the motion. Alden,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
and Bonnie. Yes. So you
And
fought 5 votes. and
Bonnie,
that's
this
all.
is Beth. I'm here too. I got here. I had a little trouble getting in, but I was on as of 7:04.
Okay, thank you. We'll add you. So Beth.
Yes.
Okay. You are released, Attorney Mead, from your very fine presentation. And on this topic, I think we are done.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. I really do think that I know it was a long process initially, but I think that everybody can agree that this project is something that the city and the Planning Board and Conservation Commission and the developer can be proud of.
Yes, and I've just made a note to go have a walk out there sometime soon. So I
Good.
think it'll be see what it looks like on the ground. So thank you again.
You're welcome.
right.
Take care. Everybody have a good night.
Good night. Second item is a approval not required for 3335 Toppins Lane. And I believe there is someone here to walk us through that, correct, Andy?
Yeah, I believe we have Molly Amber here. I'm happy to just provide an overview for you, though.
Oh,
Either
okay.
way.
I thought maybe there was an engineer or somebody who was gonna walk us through the details.
Yeah, I'm here. This is Everett Chandler.
Everett, yes, I thought so.
Thank you, Mike.
Everett, why don't you walk us through it? Andy, can you put up the plan, please?
Thank you very much. My name's Everett Chandler. I'm here for you this evening by Zoom, representing this plan for Peter and Molly Edinburgh. The intent of this plan is to take a small portion of the lot on the corner of Summit and Toppins, owned by the Voldages. Yep, exactly, the triangle there, and add that small piece of land to the land of the Edinburghs to do two things. One, to give the required frontage of 90 feet for 2 lots to be created. And the second is to allow for the shape of the lots to contain the required 80% boxes on each of the 2 new lots. So it's leaving the Voldages lot on the corner with more than sufficient frontage area. There will be one minor change to the setback on the rear lot line on that lot, simply because of the new orientation of the triangle. But it's still more than 60 feet of setback where 25 is required. And on the Edinburgh's land, you'll have the 2 lots which now have required area, frontage, and shape. And the setback on the right-hand side of the Edinburgh's house will be just over 14 feet where 10 is required. So we have two lots coming out of the Edinburghs with the frontage off of Toppins, and that's the intent of this plan.
Good. Pretty straightforward, but I will not assume that everybody is okay with it until I ask. So any comments or questions? Nobody? Okay, Andy, did you want to add anything to that?
No, I thought Everett provided a great overview. It's pretty straightforward. Obviously, the two new lots being created with the additional area, and the office recommends endorsement of the A&R plan.
Fine, okay. I'll take a motion to endorse the A&R plan for 3335 Toppins Lane.
I will make that motion, Rick.
Thank you. Second,
I'll second that motion.
and that is Heather.
Yes.
Thank you. Okay, I'll call roll for approval. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather.
Yes.
Who's next? Me, Bonnie, yes. Okay. That's done. And thank you very much, Everett. And if Molly's there, congratulations.
Great. Thank you very much, everyone.
Okay.
Have a great night.
Thanks. Correspondence, we're just acknowledging the correspondence. I don't believe there's anything we have to do with it. Andy, is that correct?
That's correct. We just wanted to make sure that the board had it, and obviously we noted it on the agenda.
Okay. Approval of minutes, we only have one set and there hasn't been enough time since we received them earlier this afternoon to review them. So I will postpone the 10:20 and the 11:03 minutes for approval on December 15th. And I'm assured by Linda that we will have them by then. And hopefully the minutes from tonight, since this is such a short, concise meeting as well. And we'll get caught up by the end of the year on minutes. Speaking of December 15th, I just wanted to point out that we already know we've continued the Minco project on Route 1. And they're just, at this moment anyway, 2 A&Rs on there. So we'll be pretty focused on the Minco project that night. The only update I have is, as you can tell, I mean, Don wasn't able to make it tonight, he was going to be late. He's probably going to make it as we adjourn. But MJ has left. She promised to stay on through the Institution for Savings. And since the settlement agreement was not approved by City Council, it won't be coming to us in its current form. So she has stayed on for 3 extra months. I thanked her and she's gone. Oh, and that reminds me, we have a candidate going through the approval process with the Planning and Development Committee. And if all goes as planned, the name will be submitted for final approval on the last council meeting of the year. I believe that's what it is, or it's sometime in December anyway. It'll be the first December meeting. So that fills one open spot and the other one is still up for grabs. That's all I have. Andy, do you have anything?
No, it would be worth noting, I guess, given the timing of the year and the change of administration coming up, trying to put together information for the new administration to understand the, a lot of background, of course, with the city's policy documents relative to land use planning and long range planning and also land use issues in general. So obviously it would make sense to work together with the chair and the vice chair to provide adequate continuity of contextual information for the new administration. But that's something that we can coordinate on in the coming weeks.
Fine, okay. Anyone else have any questions or comments? Well, short and sweet, good. we're good to go if we have when we have a motion to adjourn.
Alden, I'll move to adjourn.
Thank you.
I'll,
Second, please.
I'll second that. This is Bob.
Thanks, Bob. And I'll call roll. Alden,
Yes.
Beth,
Yes.
Bob,
Yes.
Heather,
Yes.
Rick,
Yes.
and Bonnie. Yes. So if we were in person, I'd invite you out for a drink, but we're not, and I'm not going to. The thought was there, but I think it takes a little more planning when we're spread across the city to do it. But we will get together at some point, I'm sure. So have a nice early evening to yourselves or whatever you're planning to do.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Right. Thank you.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
All right.
Bye.
Good night.
Right.